So, hello everyone. Welcome to our 8th annual Hartland Poetry Fest. A big shout out to all of you on Zoom as well. I'm so happy you are here to celebrate poetry tonight. Today's poetry event is sponsored by the Hartland Community Arts with the Hartland Public Library. That's why we're in the Hartland Public Library. So glad we can have this as a live event, right? The Hartland Community Arts would like to thank Tracy Joy, Hartland Library's director, and Reese Morris, Community Engagement Librarian of the Hartland Public Library, for co-hosting this event. Big thank you also to Sherry Altman for suggesting poets, and the rest of the HCA Arts team for helping promote this arts event. Today we gather to celebrate National Poetry Month, and we will hear from a myriad of voices in the Upper Valley. We also celebrate National Poem in Your Pocket Day. So please take there's rolled poems here in the basket. So take a rolled poem as you leave tonight. This year, 2024, our poetry theme is What Our Heart Desires. And you will hear from 5 wonderful poets tonight. Our first poet that I would like to introduce is Laura Jean
Gilloux.
Gilloux. So I'm going to read each poet's bio, and then we're going to enjoy their poetry. So Laura Jean, she, her, is a poet, musician, and singer-songwriter. Her poetry is rooted in everyday moments of her life in Wilder, Vermont. She is a graduate student in the MFA program for writers at Warren Wilson College and plans to publish a forthcoming collection of poetry after graduation in 2025. Her music is best described as city folk, part farmers market, part Chelsea market. She fronts the trio Tiny Top Hats and is a member of the good time bluegrass band Reckless Breakfast.
That's right.
When she's not writing or performing, LJ is the development manager at the Lebanon Opera House, where she's dedicated to removing barriers to arts, access, and broadening cultural horizons to the performing arts. She lives in Wilder, Vermont, with her husband, 2 young sons, and an extraordinary amount of board games. What board games do you have? Do you have board games I don't have?
Yes.
I want a list. Okay, so welcome, Laura Jean Gilloux. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to see you. I feel like this is the perfect weather for a poetry reading. It's kind of drizzly and foggy out here. The atmosphere is fantastic. Hi to everyone in the virtual space as well. And I'm so sorry because there's some really delicious looking cupcakes over here that you can't see that I will be having after the reading. And I have to say special hello to my husband who's watching virtually, Olivier, because we have 2 young children who I like to think of as being precocious, but they're not this precocious. Like they wouldn't make it. So hello out there. I am a student in a master's program, so I'm going to be reading you some of the poems that I've been writing in that program, some very fresh poems. And this is a really exciting time to share this reading with you because on my journey of discovering poetry and learning all that it can do, I'm humbled to be in the presence of my fellow readers tonight and excited to share this moment with you. This poem is called The Rubik's Cube. I can't take my eyes off this 9-year-old boy, Yi Hing, a speed-cubing prodigy who solves 6-sided puzzles in under 5 seconds. I mean, in 4.69 seconds. Watch. He matches mixed-up colors on a plastic cube, returning red to orange to yellow to green to blue to white. It might be his innocence in doing this that captivates me. Like the innocence I see in my own son, his gentle features that make me want to brush Yi Hing's dark hair out of his eyes. as they widen when he slams his hands on the timer and looks up. Finds me smiling, telling him, "Way to go!" But I'm not there. I'm watching YouTube videos in my office with my coworkers. What puzzle could I hold in my own old, slow, fumbling hands? In the time it takes to read these words, Yi Hing has solved another puzzle. His fingers flash, another puzzle. I can't figure out how to line these words up so they click into place. How to place my hands on my colleague's back when she cries. Her brother is on suicide watch again. There's only so much my hands can do. And isn't there something boring about a puzzle once it's solved? About magic once we understand the trick? Who wants to know how the man was sawed in half? How fingers can fly like doves? This next poem is called My Babies. They came out with a knife. I have the scar to prove it. A crooked smile below my small paunch. A reminder, not that I belong to them, but they belong to me. They came out smooth and round thanks to the knife. And everyone said, we could eat them up. But you can't eat avocado pits. They grow into something, eventually eaten. As when stuck with toothpicks and placed in mason jars of water on the windowsill. First the gangly roots, then the shoots, sprouting green leaves, and show us, my babies are demanding. They must learn patience. It takes years to bear such fruit and children. My boys are 9 and 5 years old. Their names are Oscar and Felix, and they're at ages. Yes, it's true. We didn't know. It skipped my generation. The odd couple. They are an odd couple, and they're very imaginative, and they just like go into these deep worlds of play and transformation of our home into other worlds, pirate ships, for example, and this next poem is sort of about that. It's called The Pirate Queen. The Pirate Queen. Hold steady the wheel of her ship, the wind unfurling, a tattered crimson flag depicting an alabaster skull and crossbones, as peach-cheeked boys with plastic parrots on their shoulders and boa constrictors in a heap at their feet dance stupid jigs. How many pirates have peg legs and eye patches? I don't know. I'm only a mother swashbuckling against laundry, a broken dishwasher, all this ringing in my ears from booming cannonballs, iron globes splashing. Listen. No, we can only imagine their thud in the deep, dark cold, where moonlight and babies don't make a sound. My modest empire no longer resembles any sovereign nation, but I've produced heirs to the throne, their warm breath at my side, where I used to carry a cutlass or saber. I left them, perhaps in Port Royal, that last fuchsia sunset I sailed through, alone, while I still had a map and a mantra, something about treasure, something worth digging for. I have a couple more poems, and I'm so excited to listen to everyone else read tonight. This one has 4 parts, and it's called To My High School Sweethearts. 1. I wanted to be kissed, not bitten, but the mosquitoes were ravenous. Our bare limbs a buffet as we walked through Dakota ditch grass up to our calves, toward my favorite gravel road outside town. And past that, a yellow combine sitting in the field, another giant sun on the horizon. but I was only thinking of your tongue, how it might touch mine. And when finally it did, I grinned like a clever buffalo wolf. 2. And so I dredge up this memory whenever I return to the Hartland from my Green Mountain state. When grass is freshly cut, a scent lingers, like now, walking the shoulder of the gravel road alone. 2 pheasants fly from the neighboring field. They could signal a coming storm, or nothing. Hard to say when I only see what I want, when what I want isn't here anymore. 3. I will bear my husband 2 sons, and play hide and seek when there's nothing left to hide behind. I know only this, he will not be you. Why am I never satisfied? In Vermont, hungry, sharp-shinned hawks will dive and swallow songbirds in a blur. 4. Silence is best in the dark, at night when crickets stop rubbing themselves to oblivion. It holds my empty desire. No, it holds my desire for emptiness. What is it I hunger for? I was never a girl in a red hood. You were never a wolf. In this soft bed, I'm my husband's wife. I want to be bitten, not kissed.
Oh my goodness.
So as you can see, I'm mainly impacted by the beauty of just everyday life, and there's many, learning the delicate balance of weaving the quotidian into poetry, into sound and music, but mainly just the beauty of being alive and being here and being this now. And so I'll leave you with something a bit domestic, but this is my world, and I'm happy to share it with you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for doing this. Thoughts while cooking. An albatross will fly the distance to the moon 10 times and back in its 60-year life. I don't need to know the exact distance to understand how far it is. Now when I tell my children, I love you to the moon and back, I understand. I'm telling them, I love you less than an average albatross. Whales sing and hear their songs in their bones. I wish I was a whale sometimes. When it dies, it sinks to the ocean floor. How wonderful. Death continues providing in the darkest cold. It might as well be the surface of the moon down there. The albatross doesn't really fly to the moon. Infrasound guides these wild avians with their 11-foot wingspans, wider than the tallest NBA All-Star over the ocean. I wish I could glide through my life like that, but I'm flapping desperately, sliding around my kitchen, cooking dinner for my family, chicken curry. The leftovers won't last more than a day. Thank you.
Okay. So, our second poet is Hatsy McGraw. Hatsy McGraw has published poems in several journals, including Bloodroot, Hanging Loose, The Salon, and Across Borders. Her poems also appeared in the anthology Birch Song, Poetry Centered in Vermont. Her poem Neighbors in the North End won the Robert Penn Warren Prize for free verse in 2004, and she was a finalist for the Sundog Poetry Book Award in 2023. Hatsy is a member of a group of local Vermont poets, sometimes referred to as the Pie Poets, who have published 2 collections of poems, Perhaps It Was the Pie and The Party Cabinet. A graduate of Vermont College's Writing for Children YA program, she lives in Hartland, Vermont with her husband, painter Tom McGraw, and their two cats, Leon and Dolly. Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. Welcome, Hatsy.
Well, thank you, Christine, and thank you, Hartland Community Arts, for inviting me back again, and to the Hartland Public Library as well. I, this year, decided that I would actually pay attention to what the topic was, because I think I ignored it last year, which is what our heart desires, I believe. And when I think of our heart desiring something, I think our as being my age group. And since I'm very close to creeping up to 70, I think that means older folks maybe. So one of the things that I appreciate at this age is being able to be happy about my past, to make peace with my past, and all that went with it. And this first poem does that in a way, and it is actually based on a real event that happened about a month and a half ago. It is called Mother-in-Law in the Bardo. Was it because we took the bracelet, your bracelet, studded with diamonds, sapphires, and other precious stones, the one you gave our daughter, who, by the way, would never wear it, to sell at auction? Or perhaps it was the Louis XV style love seat, upholstered in floral chintz, standing on cabriole legs, too low to sit in comfortably, too fussy for our house. Yes, it's true, I've listed it on Facebook Marketplace, though we've had no bites. So why put on such a show? To fling yourself in the middle of the night, from the wall to stairs to the front hall floor. I admit, it was spooky. The photo of you looking up the stairs at me, not a crack in the glass, not a fissure in the frame, just a bit of severed twine. Don't whine. Give it up. Move on. It's been 15 years, for God's sake. You can't take it with you. Another thing that I really do appreciate now that I'm getting older is spending time with my family and also with friends. And this poem, actually all of these poems are relatively new poems. This poem was written after coming back from a trip to Italy with family, but my younger sister and husband and my husband and I travel together, and we really on this trip wanted badly to see a wild boar. And on the last night, one of the last nights we were there, we in fact did. So that was part of the inspiration for this, which is called Dinner with the Old Gang. The boar, meant to be dinner, served in brown sauce over fettuccine, sits next to me at the table. His monocle bobs as he slurps red wine from a tiny trough. I am not offended. This is a foreign country, and though my jodhpurs feel tight, I ask, please, for more octopus. The octopus wraps his 8 arms, tentacles really, around me. I was hoping for more. He peels away layers of my clothing so slowly, first the leopard coat, which objects with bared teeth, then my chartreuse mohair sweater. I know there's nothing called a mo. But if there were, chartreuse is a cocktail I think it might drink. My headdress of cocktails squawks loudly at this thought. Drunk again, old bird. With his 3rd arm, the octopus from earlier in this epic pulls back fine silk to reveal, at last, my chest. Not done, he says. The boar lifts his head, bristles dripping, flashes a beastly smile, while the octopus, you guessed, lifts the skin right off my chest. I get a warm feeling, but no pain. Now another layer again, muscles, ribs, and underneath my beating heart. the whole menagerie can see inside of me. With his 8th appendage tip, the octopus flips a little key. This motion reawakens my emotion. Is it love or is it lust? That old cock fellow whom I never really trusted tips his head and cries, "You're busted. Cuckoo, cuckoo." And another, well, this poem is a little different. Last year when I was here, I read a prose poem, and this is also a prose poem. And I will say that the reason I chose it for the theme is because I hope that as I age, my heart's desire is that I will age gracefully. And this, again, is based on an actual recent experience. And you can decide whether or not I'm aging gracefully. It's called Expired. When your friend tries to rent a car out of state and finds his license has expired, you check your wallet and find your license nearly a year out of date. You make an appointment for Wednesday, it is Monday, and drive very carefully until the appointed time. At the DMV, you fill out forms and wait your turn. You are number A23, a lucky number. Maybe your lucky day. You were summoned to desk 4 right away. The woman who waits on you reminds you of your dead psychic friend, and you realize you miss her. But it appears she is here, messing with you in her own special way, because the woman who is helping you is wearing pink, your friend's favorite color. She tells you that last year at this time, you were sent a notice in the mail. You say you never received a notice. And she says you went to another DMV. Maybe it was the other, more familiar, less convenient one, but you don't remember going there. She says, looking you straight in the eyes, you renewed your license for 2 years and they gave you a paper form, a temporary license to use until you received the permanent one in the mail. You say you never received the permanent one, and you don't remember going to that other DMV. The woman at desk 4 has a computer. She finds your filled out form from last year. It has your signature. She tells you your license was mailed to you. Again, you say you never received it. She checks your address in the computer file. It is your physical address, not your mailing address. It must be the post office, you say. It was never delivered. She stares again. Then she says, it is your lucky day because you only have to pay for a replacement, not a renewal. That will be $20, please. You reach into your wallet for your credit card and see that underneath the license you have taken out to renew is another license. It has not expired. You do not tell the woman in pink, who reminds you of your psychic friend. You don't let on at all, although you know that if this woman is also psychic, she probably already knows. And you are just a little worried that you have lost your mind. The woman asks you to sit in a chair, not because she is worried for you, but because she has to take your picture for your new valid license. The license you will receive in the mail at the now corrected address. She takes the picture. She hands you your new temporary paper license. And that funny little smile on your new license photo says it all. And I have one little short last poem to read, which is from this book, The Party Cabinet. I have been in a writing group with a group of women for about 14 years, and this is our second book that we've put out. The first was called Perhaps It Was the Pie, which is why we're called the Pie Poets, or some people refer to us as that. And this is called The Truth. This is also, thank you, Hartland Community Arts, this is on the website. The Truth. And I do think that it's my heart's desire to tell the truth. Here is what I can do when you are not looking. Spit fireflies from the screen porch to the farthest post on the neighbor's fence. Cook a pot of jam so rich and red, When it crystallizes, it's spiked with rubies. Call down finches from high branches to perch on my outstretched arms. Sing all of Beethoven's Ninth backwards while holding my breath. Hang a spoon from my nose while running a marathon, barefoot. Here's what I can do when you are looking. All of these things, only much faster.
Okay, so our next poet tonight is April Ossmann? Ossmann. April Ossmann is the author of We, forthcoming January 2025 from Red Hen Press, and Event Boundaries and Anxious Music. She has received a Vermont Arts Council Creation Grant, was a finalist for the Vermont Book Award, and a former executive director of Alice James Books. She is an independent editor of poetry manuscripts and has taught a low residency MFA in creative writing programs. Welcome, April.
Thank you. Thanks, Christine, and thanks, Reese. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And I'm loving reading with this group of fabulous women. This is my new book that's coming out in a few months, but I'm actually going to read from newer poems. That'll be the fourth book, because I think they're sort of more in line with the theme, which I also paid attention to. So, Our Heart's Desire. My heart's desire these days is all about making the best of whatever time I have left with my mother, who is about to turn 85. And she's in great health, mentally and physically, but she's turning 85, so, we have more time behind us. So these poems all sort of speak to that and dealing with that. First poem is called The Question. Oh, raise your hand if you can hear me in the back. Yeah, okay, thanks. The question. The question I haven't asked ticks like a metronome under every breath. The question soft enough to elude conscious thought. Its breeze warming my cheek, gone the moment I notice it. The question's veiled shape, lost in the fog of tasks that don't matter but must be done. The question's faint scent of baking bread, mown lawn, brewing coffee, and mom. The question chiming like a bell to rise from meditation. The question at the chasm edge of apprehension I should ask before she's gone, so I can hold on to the answer that would keep me from drowning in grief, if only I'd known what question to ask. And this next poem happened. I was visiting my mother, and I just had a question kind of pop into my head that I had never thought to ask her before, and I was really surprised by the answer. On meeting the woman who is also my mother, while chatting of something mundane, a sudden brain tug unreels my question to her at 80. Have you had a great love? Her answer lands like a thrashing swordfish at my feet. I see, after decades of ignorance, the shining fish she let slip from her hook into the tumbling brook. A rainbow trout, shimmering, silver, gold, and rose. She still sees every day on waking, over 50 years later. The shimmering she hasn't stopped wanting after 40 plus years of living with a common carp. And another 10 plus widowed. The silver, gold, and rose she still sees daily swimming the glistening stream, leaping into bright sky, painting a sparkling halo in splashing, dazzling back. She swims with the dream fish she never lost, shimmering silver, gold, and rose, bathing in having let an unknown reality go, helping the carp to keep a river bottom clean, but swimming in unmarred shining no one can tarnish. And even though my mom's in great shape, I did have the first experience of taking care of her. She had a little accident several years ago in the middle of COVID, so this was an interesting time. But this isn't about my taking care of her, this is sort of before that. Peonies, please. Give me peonies, ridiculously skinny stems, and enormous cabbage flowers. Heaven sent, rose-like fragrance, wafting from garden beds, suffusing a room with their extravagance, giving their all to blooming, as if no sorrowful tomorrow loomed, as if giving were all that mattered now and in the end. Are peonies unable to support their own weight in the rain, and sometimes even in sun, a design flaw of evolution or God, the weakest of blooms, or the solution to a riddle of strength, like my underweight mother, and slim enough for a breeze to blow to queendom come, but swimming thrice weekly, like an athlete with muscle enough to pull with her arms and shoulders, her broken-hipped body 40 painful feet from the garage's cold concrete where she fell, down the tiled hall to carpeted bedroom to call her neighbor to unlock the door for EMTs, not to save her, since she did that herself, but to take her to emergency surgery, for which she had to wait a full day in pain without eating or sleeping, as caregivers rolled her regularly on her broken hip with too little pain medication. My skinny-stemmed mother, who healed from surgery like a champion at 81, swimming again in a mere 2 months, back in a few more to her best performance lap count, asking me to please send more photos of the mass of 40 peonies I keep, like memories of my mother I don't yet need, mother whose compressive strength measures like eggshells in hundreds of pounds per ounce. Peonies, heady scent and tender petals, all encompassing as a mother's hug, mother who shares my love of peonies' extravagance, not because of their brief existence on a planet that will outlast humanity, but because, why not love? And this next one really happened. We saw this hummingbird out the window in a storm, and anyway, it's called Praise Song. For a full 5 minutes, balanced on the lilac branch, lavish with purple blossoms, a ruby-throated hummingbird, eyes closed, beak open, turns its face up to the rain, fans and shakes its tail feathers and flaps its wings, with a sentience and wisdom I hope to emulate daily for even half a minute, including today, when I tell my mother, who tends a bird bath for just such gurus. And this last one is called Sunderland, and I edited a book by Kevin Gooden when I was directing Alice James called In the Ghost House Acquainted. And he had lived in Sunderland, Massachusetts, which I'd never heard of a place called that, and I'd never been able to get the name out of my mind, and this is the poem that kind of finally came from that. I only discovered recently that apparently there's a Sunderland, Vermont. So apologies to Sunderland, Vermont. This is Sunderland, Massachusetts. Oh, and I'll just note there's some definition in the poem, the root words to Sunderland that I talk about. So, Sunderland. Just thinking Sunderland tugs heartstrings of sorrow I didn't know I owned, evoking pale days, mist rising from a river, rolling over and cloaking green hills, a gray shroud failing to lift or dissipate, so not even a shimmer of sun finagles a forlorn glimpse through a host of shadows to sift hope from shorn-brown corn stalks. The season's last crickets shifting to more urgent stridulations, for lovers gone to ground for good. O Sundor, from Sundraz, isolated, alone. O Sinter, apart, without. I want Sunderland to stay yonder and anon, beyond Massachusetts, the mere 90 minutes proximity I'd never have ventured if I'd known. Home, where I bethought myself safe in Vermont's haven. Let Sunderland be a vision I never actually visit. It's some distant periphery of elderly acceptance, an Arcady of horses grazing on evergreen grass, never asked to bear even the lightest rider on their glossy backs. An Eden exempt from climate degeneration, teeming with the sweetness of the ever ripe, instead of the place that takes everyone beloved. Is it too much to ask that Sunderland be a threshold to Wonderland, a halcyon village where my mother will live after she passes, is more than a ghost, waiting to cleave to me with endless tea and sympathy beyond the bardo? Thank you.
So, our next poet is Ivy Schweitzer, is that correct? Born in Brooklyn, New York, Ivy Schweitzer has lived for many years in Norwich, Vermont, and taught English and women's gender and sexuality studies at Dartmouth College. Most recently, her poems have appeared in Passenger Poetry Contest for 2022, Ritual Well, Tikkun, New Croton Review, Mississippi Review, and Spoon River Poetry Review. A collection titled Within Flesh with Al Salehi appeared in February 2024. Her solo collection titled Tumult, Whitewash, and Stretch Marks will be published next year by Finishing Line Press. Welcome, Ivy.
Thank you, Christine. It's lovely to be here in Hartland at the Public Library, and it's my first time here, so I was so pleased to be asked. Somebody dropped out, and I was Johnny on the spot, so this is really special for me. And I should say that I'm reading today with two of my former students, April Ossmann and Diana Whitney. They were my students, and now I feel like I am their students, and they are my models and mentors. So this is just this lovely, it's just lovely. It's just really lovely. So keeping in mind the theme, I did keep it in mind. I want to start out with a few poems from this newly published book, which is on sale here Within Flesh. It was co-written by Al Salehi, who was a former Mal's graduate student at Dartmouth. In the summer of 2020, he asked to do an independent study with me, and I said, well, if it's on Emily Dickinson, I'll do it, because that was the poet that I was working on, and I really didn't want to prepare anything else. And he said, yes, I will look at her poetry written about the Civil War, about issues of race and oppression and justice and freedom, and I will write about that because I'm interested in the Black Lives Matter movement. This is the summer of 2020. So we created a syllabus, a standard syllabus, and 2 weeks into the term, Al presented me with a manuscript of 60 poems. So he was that kind of guy. He was like a whole night writing, inspired by Emily Dickinson about the Black Lives Matter movement. And we started to workshop those poems. And at some point, he knew that I had been writing political poems, and he said, well, why don't you write with me or write in response to me? And I thought, okay, that's a good idea. And before we knew it, I had 60 poems, and we had this huge collection, and we divided it in half. So in this first volume, Within Flesh, these are poems about the Black Lives Matter movement in conversation with Emily Dickinson, and her poems about race, which are not all that common because people think that she wasn't conscious of political issues, but she was. She really was. The second collection we're working on is going to be more focused on the issues of around Israel and Gaza, because it's kind of all I can really think about these days. And it's going to be in conversation with the Persian poet Rumi. And I should say Al is he's from Iran, so he's Iranian American and a Muslim, and I'm Jewish, so this is a kind of cross-cultural endeavor that we're having. So this collection, Within Flesh, is set up in a very unique way. It's a three-way conversation across these differences. Me, a Jewish woman, Al, Iranian American, and also Dickinson, who is, well, Dickinson. She was nominally a Congregationalist, but she, her business, as she says in a letter, her business is circumference. So she was this kind of cosmic thinker. Each cluster of these poems has an epigraph from a Dickinson poem that inspired them. Then there's Al's poem on the left and my poem on the right. So we didn't write poems together, we wrote in conversation with each other. And to get a sense of this, I'm going to read all three poems in the cluster, but I will tell you whose voice it is. And it's funny, we've done these readings before with me and Al, and then somebody reading the Dickinson part, and that's fun too, but couldn't do that here, so you're stuck with me. So this is a cluster called Dreaming Their Names, and this is one of, I think, my heart's desire. So in Dickinson's voice, the poets light but lamps, themselves go out. The wicks they stimulate, if vital light, in here, as do the suns, each age a lens, disseminating their circumference. And then in Al's voice, and then so soon their candle has expired. In the end, there was nothing left but mere ounces of melted wax and legends of a wick, which, when lit by nature's flames, blazed into being and shone into every corner of an ever-expanding space. And then my poem. What is the circumference of a life? Like a candle, flare and douse, but names, part breath, part prayer, measure who we are, deathless as long as syllables burst from the braided wick of voices raised together. We call on our gods in extremity, ignite these names, the unanointed. And of course, I'm troping on the say their names mantra. And the last title in the book, which is titled A United State. In Dickinson's voice, this is a poem I'm sure you will recognize. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. And I see people mouthing it. It's just a beautiful poem. So in Al's voice, love shall always be light and light, but hate is heavy, bright with spite. The windows to the world demonstrate hues all swirled around a single wish that sharply grows to someday sever all ropes from gallows. An era where we Control-Alt-Delete the ignorant cries of "this is our street," hoping as equals our neighbors will foil all vicious demands for blood and for soil. Malice replaced by being torn to tatters from the faith that Black lives and all love matters. Allowing our differences and then resolving a pact to embrace all humanity as a resolute act. For the brilliant day we choose to elevate together, it shall be as one bird of many colorful feathers. And then in my voice. Love will always be a messy, maybe'd flight across Dickinson's unplausible divides. Can we love what is out of our hands. With two, we recognize love, but love is also many around the kitchen table, sharing bowls and breath with strangers who put us all on best behavior. Can we love what we cannot touch? Touch me, though we dwell on opposite ends of much breath. Don't let this messiness unmake us. Make it matter. Take what I offer, myself, singing in windows flung open, doors refusing their jams, so we pass through, pass into each other, not passers-by, but passengers in flight, all colors abroad, abreast, unbranded, borderless. And now a few poems in a slightly different register from my forthcoming solo collection, which Christine mentioned, titled Tumult, Whitewash, and Stretch Marks, which I hope will see the light in 2025. It's a memoir in poetry reflecting on my experiences as a nerdy Jewish girl growing up in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, and how that shaped my particular sense of my whiteness. So it's connected to Within Flesh. So from the first section, which is called Tumult, which is about my Jewish identity. And this is a poem called Romanian Crawl. Can we talk, Grandma Mary? You were never Bubby for me. The door slammed early on Yiddish, Soll nicht kein Mol mehr sein du. Sly undertow pulling us back to the ghetto. Like we gabbed those special sleepover nights above Dad's upholstery store. You rolling my long hair into bouncy rag curls, the daily Forovitz draped over the gray Formica kitchen table, you gripping the rim of a tall glass of hot tea and drinking it through a sugar cube you held on your tongue, seeing the need to send me away, sweltering summers, my parents leaving me, only 7, at the Bluebird City bus, big trunk of carefully labeled clothes and Grandpa Israel's scratchy wool blanket with the tulip pattern. Sleeping in rows of metal cots in wooden bunks, linking arms and belting out the camp song, Kindering of Weltanaya, set this lousy camp on fire. Hushed, that was really the song, hushed Shabbos dinners on Stiller Ovent, endless spiels about our history, lost on me, Yiddish spoken in our house so we would not understand. But you understood, driving up on visiting days to swim in Sylvan Lake, your striking head of silver waves held high above the water, arms churning like creaky windmills. Bubby, of the sweet tongue, I beg you, explain how to birth the new world promised by your workman's circle Menschkeit. So it's a kind of call to the ancestors. And then from the second section, called Whitewash, which is more about racial identity. And this is from a long sequence called Manchester, which is about my junior year abroad studying in England, and it's called Colin. I'm centrifugal and love the color burgundy. Loved it before it became the new black. I've never met a rule I don't want to break. Breakage was the rule back then when black had only just become beautiful. Remember? In the gray-toned photo, now a half-century old, you are beautiful. You saturate the center, your high, pointed afro defiant against bare lowland trees. Lips parted, you must be tripping that West Indian lilt, tinged with Cockney thrilling to my raw American ears. We were 20, and I was far from home. I became beautiful when Barbra Streisand rocked the Johnny Carson show crooning, free and easy, that's my style. Here, I am captured at the edge in beaded bell-bottoms and a burgundy evening jacket lined with seal. I often kept myself from what I wanted, fearing being thought too forward, entitled. But my eyes, my body, whole being yearn towards you. Did we share a bed? I cannot remember. your last name. The photo shows distant buildings stark and dumb, not your long, slender hands always in motion, like a maestro or magician, your swagger and banter in the rain-slicked, freezing mud. And in a very different, I think, mood, lighter mood, but still on our theme of heart's desire, from the third section titled Stretch Marks, which is about growing and growth and change, hopefully. So all you need to know about this poem is that Becca is my daughter, our daughter.
Thank you.
Couldn't have done it without you.
Yes, you could.
Becca in middle school. Beating small fists on her burning face, hunched on a chair pulled up to my desk in the laundry room, awash in student essays, bookshelves wedged between washer and dryer. On the playground, big boys called a smaller boy gay. On the school bus home, she mulled over our friends Lisa and Lexi, the wedding of Sam and Quinn in the Thetford church, their long, long kiss. What would Rosie the Riveter do, I asked, one of her namesakes. Silence. Essays rustled restlessly for grades. Maybe write a letter to the principal, I tried. Can a good girl do that? She squeaked. Alarms clanged in my head, the words good and girl tangoing across a minefield. Remember our promise in karate, repeating before each class to protect the path of truth. So we sounded out homophobia, and she conjured the playground, a green space grown over with grass and clover. I hope, she scrawled on the big yellow legal pad in her best looping script. Next day, she came home aghast, her letter read out in every homeroom. We hugged and high-fived, but kept the sleeves of our rosy blue work shirts rolled up. Thank you.
Okay. So, our next poet is Diana Whitney, right? Diana Whitney writes across genres with a focus on feminism, motherhood, and sexuality. She's the author of 2 collections of poetry and the editor of the best-selling anthology, You Don't Have to Be Everything, Poems for Girls Becoming Themselves. Winner of the Claudia Lewis Award. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Kenyon Review, Glamour, Crab Orchard Review, and many more. Her first book, Wanting It, won the Rubery Book Award in poetry. Her latest collection, Dark Beds, was released in fall 2023 by June Road Press and became a small press bestseller. Diana has an MFA in poetry from New England College and a master's in English literature from Oxford University. She lives in Vermont with her family, where she leads writing workshops and works as an editor and writing coach. Find out more at www.diana-whitney.com. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you. Thanks, Christine. Thanks to everyone for coming out on a rainy Thursday night. And like Laura Jean said, it's kind of the perfect poetry weather. And I'm really honored to be reading here with these wonderful women poets. And like Ivy said, she was my professor a long time ago. And I'm going to confess, I totally missed the theme, so I've been scrambling to redo my set list as I listen to all the wonderful poems. And I'm going to start with the first poem in my book, Dark Beds. And just In case you haven't noticed, the poets' books are here, so you can see us after. This is called Curiosity, and it has an epigraph from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Resistance is useless. Curiosity. On the northbound lane following the river, I try to explain about horse paths, cart paths, earth eaters, the first dozers and rollers laying hot tar over centuries of dirt. My daughters still believe whatever I say, mine me for knowledge practical and vast. Could the moon have a moon, Ava asks, and I don't know. It probably could have some asteroid chip or space station trash snagged into orbit, natural satellite, a crushed Coke can, or a bottle cap. But it wouldn't last. We can't steer the mothership. The girls want me always in the kitchen like a planet, steady sphere with gravitational pull, slow burn on the horizon all night, anchoring their dreams in flannel and cold cream. They want me cut loose on the tramp, big crazy bounces, playing Simon Says and Moonwalk Chase. I told them Curiosity, the Mars rover, found water in red dunes, trace molecules, ices, thin film, and fine dust. We hunted the meteorite deep on museum bedrock, pitted hunk of solid iron radiant in the velvet dark, 34-ton heart from the asteroid belt burned into being, 4 billion years old. Carmen ran pell-mell through the hall of human history, past Cro-Magnon skulls and femur bones, past DNA spiraling slow in a glass case, to see what she'd been promised, to lay her cheek against the cool, hard evidence of space. So she did get her heart's desire. So this book took a really long time to come into the world, so it addresses motherhood and marriage and domesticity and transgression and betrayal and also grief. So I was really moved by April's poems about her mother, and I'm going to read some poems for my mother. This one is called Word Finding, and word finding is one of the most pervasive symptoms of the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. Word finding. 3 words we must never speak. Do you remember? My question is a stone thrown into the deep waters of our conversation. Anxiety ripples outward, tip of the tip of the tip of the tongue. I'm sorry, I can't. Words slip past, scatter like minnows in a dark lake. Awareness of the sense, but not the syllables. Slippery things moving in reeds and shadows. Don't hunt them. Don't grasp. Cast a net lightly and the words swim back, finned silver, triumphant, as we row the lake again in our quiet boat, all eyes and hands.
Wow.
So this book came out in October, just a few weeks after my mom died, after a 10-year journey battle with Alzheimer's disease. So she's really present in this book, and she's present when I read from it. So I'm going to alternate. I'll probably read another poem about her, but I'm gonna fast forward to some of the Dark Beds poems. This one's called Torched. All the garish flowers opened in midsummer, tiger lilies yawning on the road, bordello blooms climbing over each other, bee balm, bloom poppy, bronzy red and gold. I dragged the couch onto the summer porch in another careless gesture toward desire. You were the one who lit the torch with pollen, diesel, and meadow fire, cooled it with blackberries dripping juice, water pulled from an alpine spring. The cat unfurled herself on the car roof like a black velvet ribbon of longing. The hay lay knit and spun in torrid rows, falling in a blonde mess to the shoulders of the field. You coasted slow as syrup down the edge of my daydream. Engine purring, windows down, rusty truck of trouble come back around. So I have a few sonnets in this book. They all take about 1 minute to read. And because I live in Vermont, I write a lot about the weather, which is always nice to read to an audience who knows. So this is probably a January poem. It's called Geography. The house shuddered all day, trying to cast me out, but I would not abandon. The wind, ravenous gusts, arrived in gasps through chinks in the plaster, rattled door jambs, spit snow shards on channels of glare ice. A whole geography took shape in a king bed, vast continent of quilt where we played nice, turned and hugged the coasts. Caught in a net of half-truths, I thrashed like a landlocked panfish, slick with perilous hunger. And the story paid out its unseen line, thoughts unwinding in dark sheets. Phantom lover like a barb in the gills, rasping, ruin me, take me, sink me in the water again. So go to my list. This book took so long to come into being because I'm a slow writer, and I was also kind of working on a memoir during the same time that the girls who are quite young in that Curiosity poem are preteen and teen by the time we get to the end of the book. And this one's called Dumb Blonde. It's a feminist poem, don't worry. Dumb Blonde. Why do the girls mock even the puppy, bumbling through snow on big golden paws, so loyal, so trusting, all melty-eyed innocence, waggling her rear like a hula skirt, rolling on her back to expose her belly fur to any stranger in the road? She's eager for a word or a pat, the sheer bliss of stroking, how she closes her eyes and splays her legs, ragdoll baby dog, offering up her softness. Pathetic. They call her Dumb Blonde, laugh at her groveling, hide her toys, feed her a glob of peanut butter, and snort at her tongue working overtime, compulsive creature lapping its need in quick, pink, humiliating hunger. Dumb Blonde, they smirk. Don't insult her, I say. She doesn't know, they protest, loving her up, rubbing her chest, spooning her on the living room rug, their gold hair burrowed in her thick coat. Yes, she's a love sponge, but she'll snap if you make a move for her marrow bone. She knows what she likes, won't hesitate to show it. When the boxer mounts her, she snarls like a jackal, spins and shakes him off, her signature move. Fierce bitch, stubborn bitch, sweet bitch with the fox blonde face, the only one I'll never have to teach. All right, so I'm gonna read. I'm gonna return to a poem for my mom. Her name was Jude, so just letting her presence be here tonight in the room. It's called The Long Goodbye, which is also another name for Alzheimer's, and it is a long goodbye. The Long Goodbye. My man returns with a canvas bag of salmon, fresh lettuce, green leaves tipped with red, ripped into the maple bowl, and the fat rose fillet laid out and rubbed with oil. He wants to talk about transference, and I want to talk about weather, how April snow falls and the flowers survive. The daffodils fold up and shiver through the storm. If there's a lesson here in patience, I don't want to hear it. At my mother's house, all the rugs are gone, so the wheelchair won't catch. Her bare floors are cleaner than they've ever been. No more pets or children. No more clutter. The strange peace of living without language or memory. The house ticking as she nods in the recliner, parting her lips for the spoon of ice cream. Her legs are 2 sticks, crooked in loose leggings. And my girls shoot up to 5.5 feet. And my man sears the salmon, feeds the skin to the dog, serves the pink steaks with salad in the humming mass of our kitchen. How can you savor what you have when it demands so much attention? Ticks are clinging with 2 legs to the grasses, sensing heat and carbon dioxide. They can feel us coming and seek out our skin. They love the warm places, armpits and groins, the crevice behind an ear. Run your fingers everywhere. Danger is the size of a sesame seed, a single brain cell, smaller. If I could, I'd make my mother walk and talk again. But what do I know of magic or redemption? Only the long goodbye. How tired we are of doing our best. So I think I might read a brand new poem and then finish with the last poem in the book, if that sounds all right for you. So 2 more. It's actually not that new, but it's from a manuscript that I finished in December called Girl Trouble, which is about raising girls, and it's pretty heavy one. It's about rape culture and excavating female adolescence. But this one happens to also be about maple syrup in Vermont, so it's got a little bit of everything. It's, a complex of laboratories and habitats, and that's from NASA's description of the International Space Station. A complex of laboratories and habitats. The dirty iceberg by the back door won't melt until April, but today, sugaring season is over. No more clear cold sap drunk straight from the bucket, elixir flowing like an alpine stream, my face pressed to the metal lip, the veins of spring open, the trees offering up their sweetness for days, weeks, the holding tanks full of it, as you boiled at night by headlamp and starshine, as the space station arced above us, burning like a meteor, orbiting Earth at 7 kilometers per second, 15 sunrises a day. Were the astronauts up there floating or sleeping, or running on treadmills, or eating silver pockets of space ice cream? Did they dream of us below, standing by the boil, wreathed in wood smoke and maple steam? We are specks on a blue-green planet. March was cold and sweet and brutal. Then it turned. Sudden heat. I gather sap bare-armed in a cotton tee, haul the wagon through boggy mud ruts. In the pails, a scattering of drowned ants and beetles. The last sap is cloudy and oily, some yellow as piss. It's not like love or childhood. When it's over, you'll know it's over.
Wow.
All right, and then the last poem in Dark Buds. You know, the question, when I put this manuscript together, it's in 3 sections, which in my mind I organized according to a 3-act structure of conflict, crisis, and resolution. And I'm never sure whether that's apparent to readers or not, but it was the organizing principle for the manuscript. And so the driving question maybe of Dark Buds is like, do they make it? Does this marriage last? And you can tell the answer by looking at the dedication, so I'm not giving anything away. So, and this is the final poem. Current. Years passed. I grew too old for danger. No more playing the nymph in the summer forest. No more thrill of secret trysts and haiku, every flower and seed imbued with meaning. Milkweed floating across the valley, aloft on thermals of longing. Goldenrod keeled over in rain, a gesture of surrender. Transgression was once the most interesting thing about me. Now I see we were tediously ordinary, lacking even the courage to destroy our lives. I feel nothing now, except pinpricks of curiosity, the warmth and heft of household bonds. The goddess you mistook me for has vanished, morning fog lifting to reveal the river, indifferent current rolling south to merge with a colder tide.
Oh dear.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's all the poets that are going to be reading tonight. So I'd like to thank all of our poets for being here tonight. But now it's time to play Ask the Poet. So I have a few questions, and I'm sure you have questions as well. So my first two questions are, and I'd like everyone who's read tonight to answer these questions, are, how did you get started writing poetry?
Oh dear.
Who wants to go first? Gosh, do you want to go in alphabetical order again?
Okay, sure.
That would be you.
You, Laura.
Well, I think I came to it as many of us did, was just at a very young age before even kind of realizing what poetry was. And as Christine said, I also sing and write songs. So I write a lot of lyrics and, you know, I guess one kind of informed the other as I was growing up. But after doing the MALS program at Dartmouth, I had some really key professors who just encouraged me to keep studying. So like Vivie Francis was really impactful for me to encourage me to keep going and keep doing it. And it's been really rewarding to enter this space of reading poetry at deeper levels. So.
Okay. Go ahead. Oh, alphabetically, I'm next. And I wonder if I'll answer the same way I did last year. We
Do you
can
wanna
check
come
the
up here?
tapes.
You come up here, so they can see you.
We can check the tapes, but I know that I started writing poetry as a child because I found one of my childhood ballads from 5th grade, which was, I was angry at a friend, so it was a mean ballad. But it rhymed, and it was rhythmic, and it was a ballad. And I grew up in a family where both of my parents were educators, and my mom was a preschool teacher. So we had a lot of children's literature around, and there was a lot of poetry read to us all the time. So I heard it. I didn't write at all as a young teenager, or as a teenager, or even in college. But as I think in my 30s I started writing, and I've kept writing since. And you know I'm almost 70 because I already told you.
Me too.
People.
Yeah, I wrote my first poem when I was 7, and I think it was, at that time I was reading fairy tales and loving fairy tales, and so the poem was about a knight, some fairy tale stuff. And when I was 10, I read some of Robert Frost's poetry, and I read his biography. There used to be this little series of biographies for whatever grade I was in, 5th grade or 4th grade or whatever it was, and they had biographies of all these famous people, and I just fell in love with Robert Frost's poetry, and so I've been writing poetry regularly since I was 10. And it's how I ended up in Vermont. I was born in California like Frost, and I wanted to move to Vermont and be in a place with more trees and fewer people and write poems, and here I am.
Heidi, you're next.
Again, like other poets here, I wrote when I was young. I mean, when you're young, you just do what feels natural, and what's lovely about being a child is you're not censored in that way. And so I just wrote poems, and I don't really, and I must have read I was a real voracious reader, so I must have been reading poetry, but I just remember just writing poems, and eventually I did write a poem about that grandmother who died, which was the first poem that got published, so I was probably 10 or 11, or, you know, I was really young when that happened. I mean, published in some local, you know, little newspaper or something. So it's something that I've always done, but at some point I chose to actually not be a working poet, but to be a professor of poetry. And so for many years, almost 35 years, I taught poetry. I mean, I taught about poetry from a critical perspective at Dartmouth College. And I taught women's poetry, and I taught early American poetry, Puritan poetry. So, and I taught Dickinson. He's another one of the poets that I taught. So I kind of was on the teaching end of it. And then when I retired, or when I got close to retirement, I mean, well, Tom told me, you know, years ago that I should be writing poetry. I just started to write more seriously in kind of some more professional way, if you want to call it that. It's all gravy at this point. So, so that's that. That's my trajectory. Diana.
So my official story is that my first poem, or the one I really remember writing, was like a very depressed summer when I was 13 years old, and I wrote an ode to the Beatles, which was just, I was just so like overcome with emotion, and it had this very melodramatic first line. I was born into the magic 20 years too late. And then I threaded all like all these different song titles into this poem. And I remember that thrill of composition. And then I remember like it was like a rainy afternoon in like a cabin up in northern Maine with nothing to do, you know, there's no screens back then. And then I went and showed it to my mom, who I read it to her, or maybe she just read it in my little journal, and she told me it was wonderful, which I know is like, it was like a really sappy poem, but that's what you need, especially when you're 13, is someone to encourage you. So that's sort of my official story, but then like recently I went and my mom had actually saved like childhood writings, and I was writing poems as a little kid. Like in handwriting, often, I don't know, about like sheep or different colors or whatever. So it's funny that I don't really have a memory of that, like the way it sounds like you do. I don't have like that very early childhood memory, but I think it was very formative to me that I had a lot of big feelings as a like teen, and that was my outlet, and so I just didn't stop, and I like wrote right through high school, which, you know, felt like was like one of the only ways that I survived that experience. And yeah, and then I was a creative writing major at Dartmouth, and I have gone through, do go through periods of time, which the wonderful late poet Louise Gluck talked about, periods of silence. And that is definitely, I had a long period of silence in what I call the baby cave after my babies were born, when I did not write poems. That specific kind of like attention and focus that you need. I know that some parents, mothers are able to do it, and I just simply was not. And my way back into writing was writing prose for a long time.
Other question. Let's see what so the second thing I was going to ask poets were what is your process for writing poetry?
These are heavy.
You can give a light answer. You don't have to give an in-depth answer.
Sure. No, I can speak to this a little bit because I'm currently studying it in an MFA program, so it's got to be really structured. I don't really have a choice. I have to turn new work in every 3 weeks, and so I've come to discover, for me, that I wake up and the first thing I do in the morning is read or write poetry. And sometimes I start by editing. I have a friend, she calls it like making rounds, like a doctor would on patients. So I've got all of my poems I'm working on. I like make my daily rounds and see what I can do with those, because just like a little bit every day as I'm editing and working. And my brain I have a job that's really demanding, and so, but first thing in the morning it's fresh and like there's nothing else that's crept in there to suck my attention away. So I'm just a morning writer and editor, and when I read in the morning, it's like it absorbs in me with a greater degree than at the end of the day. At the end of the day, I'm fried and I'm spent, and I just want to crawl into bed. So I do creative work in the morning, and I can do more of my reading later. But and it's amazing what you can get done from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. like every day. It's almost like your best time there, and then you're kind of good to go. That's my process.
You.
I'm accountable to my writing group. And that's that's the way I think of it, because it does make me continue to write. I don't want to say that I'm a lazy writer, but I don't write consistently. I'm not in an I remember the MFA program 15, 20 years ago and doing that, but I'm not there now. So also sometimes I will just have a spurt where something happens and I will write 2 or 3 or 4 poems, and not finished poems, but I will have that kind of inspiration, and then I won't for a while. But it does help that we're meeting twice a month, and that I know that I'm going to be meeting with these other women, and we're going to be going over poems, which means I need to have a poem. So.
Painful. So I'm a little more like Hatsy in the sense of I like to be inspired. And I want inspiration to like pick me up and throw me over a shoulder and take me off to the caves. And, so I don't get up every day, although I really admire people who do that and write for a couple hours. I do get up every day really early and edit other people's poetry for many hours. So I'm doing some version of writing every day, all day. But I write, sometimes it's something I keep thinking about, and I realize, I have to write about that. That image keeps popping up into my mind. And writing is, that's, for me, it's sort of my spiritual work. If I can't figure something out, or there's something I'm dealing with that I can't understand, that tends to be where I go to with my writing. Like poems about my mother now. The book that's coming out is a spiritual look at politics and trying to reach across the divide, because that got very personal with some family stuff that happened around a certain person being elected. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but so I write by, I want to be inspired, and I'm not above courting inspiration, I guess that's it. And sometimes I start to get kind of crabby, and I realize it's because I haven't written in a while and I need to write because I'm getting crabby.
Well, I have to say the poems, many of the poems in these 2 books came to me unbidden. I mean, I remember exactly when it started, which was, it was the summer of 2020, and I always sleep in the V-berth of our sailboat. We were on our sailboat in Penobscot Bay, and I remember, and I had been reading all this stuff. I was reading, Resma Medicum's In My Grandmother's Hands, and, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and White Fragility, and all those books that we were all reading. And there was one night when a poem woke me up. I said, the muse knocked, and I had to get up. Tom was sleeping, and I wrote a poem, and I compose on my computer. I know that sounds terrible, but I do. I compose on my computer because my handwriting is atrocious at this point, and I'm a very quick typist. And I had my computer, and then I went back to sleep, and then the muse came and said, I'm not done with you yet, and I had to get up, and this happened like 3 or 4 times, and I drafted 3 or 4 poems, and I still have stuff that I haven't looked at. There was something about Whitman. Whitman is in there. Whitman is take the doors off the jams, that's Whitman. I don't know if people recognize that. So that's, you know, that's how this first part started, but what I do now is more like, you know, LJ, I get up every morning. I don't get up that early because I don't have to, and I have to run or walk before I have to do physical. But then I sit at my desk, and I feel like if you sit at your desk every day at the same time, the muse knows you're there, and if she wants to come visit, that's great. And if sometimes she doesn't, sometimes she does, but you're there and you're doing other work, you're reading a blah blah blah. And I find that if I just, you know, and I've trained my friends not to call or text between 9 and 12. It's like I'm not available. I mean, for emergencies I am. And I feel like that works. It gives me, you know, a kind of, because I'm a very centrifugal person, so I need structure. And that gives me a structure. It's like a little kind of structure that I can live in. It's enough discipline that I have the freedom to do what I want in those hours, but I'm there in case lightning strikes, and sometimes it does. The other thing that I've been doing, I don't know, this is for the poets, is I've been doing this poetry game that I learned of in some workshop where everybody had to contribute a noun and a verb. And they had to be really gritty words, like really unusual words. And you made a list, and then you had to write a poem with all the nouns and the verbs, right? And you couldn't use your contribution until you had used everybody else's or something like that. So I started to do that with like Emily Dickinson poems. Like I just took all the nouns and all the verbs, and then I would write a poem using those nouns and verbs. And it was, so Dickinson was there. You could do it with any poem, right? But Dickinson was kind of there in the poem, but it was my poem. But I had a structure. I had a framework. It wasn't just a white page, which is terrifying, right? So that has really been, as a process, you know, that's another kind of like a little, you have to trick yourself sometimes into writing, because it's not intuitive.
And I'd love to add, like, for people here that are poets that want some ideas, like there is something like freeing about a structure, like traditional poetic forms, or like these unique challenges of like using a tropical bird, incorporate a place in the desert, incorporate this, incorporate that, can really actually help free your writing to have these special,
Well, that's something
hoops
that
you need to jump
we
through.
do a lot in
Yeah.
the group, is especially if we acknowledge that we're feeling stuck, we give each other prompts. So we send each other different prompts, which are often games like that. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, but at least it gives you a place to start and something to work with.
And I also have to be super honest, because I know my husband's watching this. I get up at like 5:30. Not 5. I mean, I threw out 5 to 7, but the point is when I wake up, that has to be the first thing I basically do. But I just don't. I know he's gonna watch this and then be like, "You do not get up at 5 a.m." I don't. I try.
It feels like it's truth to feeling.
Truth to feeling,
Truth to
yes,
fact.
like exactly.
Oh, this is a hard question for me. My process shifts over time, so I can't, like the way that I wrote when I was like a young person in my 20s without kids, and the way that, yeah, it's changed. So I'm currently, because I just finished a big project, and because I'm really in like a time of grief and depression, I've sort of removed the pressure to write, and instead I'm reading a lot. And that's what I do to kind of fill the space. I mean, I'm reading a lot of novels, but I always have poetry by my bed. So I return to poems that I love, and I work as an editor and writing coach, so I'm always recommending my favorite poems to writers who I'm working with, and doing those close readings. Like, it helps keep the language alive for me. But I also, like Hatsy, have a writing group, which was part of actually how I got back into writing during the baby cave. I wrote a parenting column called Spilt Milk while my kids were really, really little. and I wasn't sleeping much. And it was because of that group, and I would show up on a Tuesday night and I could bang out 900 words, and then it was like it appeared in the newspaper and it got syndicated, and it was really good to have a deadline every 2 weeks. I really needed that. So that became my process then. And then eventually I started writing poems again, but within that group. So where I am now, I kind of have this notebook that I'll jot ideas. I think, was it somebody who said a sound or an image or an idea will circulate in my mind for a long time? Yeah. So I currently have that, and I sort of have a list of things, or sometimes it's even like a saying. Like I was just thinking about that saying, the chickens come home to roost, and what does that even mean? And is it a curse or an omen? And so I kind of will just play around, and I do write a first draft longhand. Not even like I will do it on like a scrap piece of paper, so it feels really low stakes. And it's not like if I go to the computer too quickly, then it very quickly for me becomes too official, or it's supposed to be like good and finished and polished. And there's a saying that I like, which is time is the best editor. So sometimes after you have a draft, it's good to set it aside. But then often for me, when I have a draft, then I become obsessed, and I will just like do nothing but think about it or go back over it and change, like take a word out, and then the next day I'll put it back in. And so that's kind of how I work. But it's liable to shift.
Okay, so, oh dear. All right, so anybody have any other questions? Otherwise we will adjourn it and enjoy your treats. And if you want to talk to any of the authors about, if you love this event, please support the Hartland Public Library for events like this. And talk to the wonderful poets, and they have books here, and have some treats, and that's it. Thanks for coming.